I've never actually been to that campus. I've been to the other one, but like I feel like all Google campuses have this. You're at Google somehow, right? LinkedIn's right next door, and but you're not stumbling into LinkedIn. You're not stumbling into Facebook even.
No, it's all the primary colors.
Right, it is the primary colors.
Yeah.
You're right. And the landscape, I feel like they have their own. Maybe they have their own kind of secret visual design guidelines for gardens.
I'm sure that there are guidelines
that kind of like exemplify that. But yeah, so you're at Kubernetes now. You're helping kind of internally, right, and helping the Kubernetes project. And you've been involved in open source for a long time, in communities in general for a long time.
Yeah, my first open source community was MySQL.
MySQL.
Back when it was cool.
Yeah, well, MySQL is cool again, right? I mean, it's like cool. Now Facebook is doing like the MyRocks and all that, so MySQL is coming back just like Postgres. And you've done like OSCON for many years, right? You were the chair of that conference, like biggest open source conference, I want to say.
Yeah.
One of the biggest non-vendor conferences overall, right?
Yeah.
And so you've seen a lot of community stuff come and go. And this is something I still think is mesmerizing to people in general. It's like I get tons of people asking like, oh, like how do you build communities around software? And I have this product, I make a lot of money. Can you build a community for me? Or like you get all kind of different weird questions. It's really not a well understood topic at all. And so I was wondering if we could kind of talk about that a little bit. I feel like this is something that isn't really well understood. And so maybe let's start with that obvious question that like, people still come up with.
Where do I get a community?
How do I get a community, right? I have a product, I'm making tons of money, customers love it. Why can't I just get a community? Why do I want a community in the first place? Why do people do that in your opinion?
Well, so community means a lot of different things to different people. And the term community manager is very overloaded in the industry as well. But if you look at your user group, you have a user community. If you just look at them as a cohesive group of people, that is a community. If you encourage them and engage with them, then you're soliciting good feedback, you're getting answers to your questions, you're being able to anticipate their needs, you're growing a community. It's just a group of people.
Right, so the answer is most companies have a community, they have customers, right?
Yes.
And maybe they just don't think of them that way,
Exactly.
Maybe they don't listen to them that way, but they already have de facto one, right? But usually people mean something different. Like people usually mean like, I want developers to use my stuff. Either developer that are on the same continuum as eventually people are going to become customers, or developers as a platform play, so to speak. They're like, oh, if I have apps that are built on my platform.
I'm looking to build an ecosystem, and I want this broader community that is also contributing to the software and building adjacent pieces.
Right. So usually that's what they don't have, right? In my experience at least, right? They don't have either developers on the kind of the low end of their pricing, or a free kind of tier, or they don't have developers in that platform sense of like, there's nobody building apps against my platform, or I want to have a platform. And so, how do you answer that question? I guess people ask you that all the time too, like, help me make a community, right? How do you do that, right? How do you go from your, hopefully your customer community to kind of, building a developer community? Is that even possible?
So it certainly is. You have a customer community, you have a user community. Those are the people that can seed your developer community. They're the people that know your product as well or better than you do in a lot of cases, or certainly from a different perspective than you do. And so engaging with them is really the starting point. It's finding out what they know about your product or your software that you don't, or that you haven't thought of, or that it may be a whole new market that you don't want to address. Maybe you knew that it was something that was interesting, but you find a couple of people who are super interested in, expanding to the specifics of the space industry's requirements.
So let's say, like, for example, like they might request a feature, and you might think like, oh, that's just a painful customer that just wants more features. But maybe what they're highlighting is especially that kind of community spirit that you can try to harness. Maybe if you gave them more tools, they could actually build a lot of those features themselves, and that would become kind of that developer community you're looking for.
Which
right?
ends up being that difference between a product and a platform, is you start making the evolution to more points where people can build against your tooling.
Right, that's a really good way to put it, actually. And I guess the underlying truth underneath all that, because I don't want to skip over that, is that it's really hard to quote unquote add a community, right? You can't just kind of bring that wholesale or spend $1 million marketing dollars and have a community. And so, I guess, maybe we should highlight that we're talking about these specific means of listening to your customer, like think about adding features, think about opening up ways people can build against your platform, because that's driving off the passion that people may already hopefully have for your company, for your product. And that's really the only way to make something grow, at least in my experience, right? Would you agree with that as well?
I would completely agree with that, because otherwise you're Otherwise, it's work.
Right.
In the sense of you're having to pay someone to advocate for you, you're having to pay someone to make a feature for you, and then it looks very different from somebody being excited enough about, or a company being even excited enough about the product or software you're working on in order to make it bigger and better. It's looking at it as a positive sum game.
Right.
And trying to say that we can do this better together.
Right. And that excitement and that passion, I think, is actually like something that a lot of people in that situation of wanting to grow a community, build a community, they dread the most, because they see their company or their product as like this very work-like thing, and it's very intense and it's very serious, and that's why they make money, because it's very, very serious. But I think the unescapable truth of it is the more fun you can build, the more passion you can have at the core of your product, the easier it is going to be to build a community on top of it. And that's why I think, you see some stuff like Kubernetes, taking off really, really well, like one of the most successful open source projects, right? In terms of how quickly it's growing, how many committers on GitHub you have and all that. And, wasn't a product, wasn't really anything kind of built in that strong sense. There wasn't like I assume some genius in the middle of Google saying like, this is going to be a huge community, right? I mean, you would hope that, but you start with a lot of passion about how you build your product. So how do you navigate that, I guess? You're going from something very different than most people have, which is you have this great community, and this is turning into something different as you grow. Most people have the opposite, but you've done a little bit of both, right? nginx was a similar situation, right?
Yeah, so my time at nginx was very much about having a lot of people as an install base, but not any sort of cohesive community, not a lot of developers, because most of the developers were hired by the company nginx.
Right.
And so there was...
That happens a lot, by the way.
Yes.
A lot of companies, a lot of projects, they just kind of a natural cap, I guess, on the community size, and you have this weird incentive where it's better to have all those people working for you because you have the budget as a startup to do that, rather than like having them be on the outside. But then that creates a lot of problem in terms of,
It does. It ends up being a space where you don't have a lot of people contributing from the outside, and you don't have a lot of people engaging with new ideas, which means sometimes you're missing the mark, sometimes you're not. Sometimes you are the person who can recognize what product your end user needs, and sometimes you, if you're not listening well enough, or you're not having people contribute back in, you miss a completely different perspective. So again, it's that positive sum game. We can do more with more people if we're willing to engage and work with them to bring them up to the standards to engage them.
But there's a strata right there of a different kind of community, right? You have your committers, your core committers sometimes, then you have your external committers or people contributing like plugins or like whatever shade of gray there. And then you have your user community, and that still has real value. I mean, nginx, ton of users, ton of people kind of using it, customizing it, building different products on it. API gateways built in nginx, and different kind of companies doing that. And so all these different strata have value, right? So would you say that in general, it's kind of possible to find some kind of shade of gray where you can build a community, like some value place, right?
One of the things I'm most proud of at nginx is working with the team from my first day in Moscow, trying to get to a space where there are pluggable modules instead of having to have everything compiled in, and that made the sustainability and supportability model for a company very difficult when everyone was compiling in their own modules.
Right.
So getting to a space where there are clean edges, where we can have good, strong contracts, and people from outside can contribute and participate and engage on those clean boundaries is very important.
Right. So that's a really good kind of second lesson, right? Like you build in the passion, but you also need to have those APIs, right, in a very technical sense, or those interaction points maybe in a larger sense. Maybe it's just a meetup group, maybe it's just a conference you do once a year, maybe it's just drinks at a bar, or whatever makes sense for your community. But you need those interaction points. You need to open something, right? Even if it's not technical, to get something to go. And those tend to be good starting points. Like, would you have other starting points you'd recommend for people? Like things that are usually good to help kickstart a community?
Being positive about the things that you're given, even when it's not necessarily what you're looking for, or it's midnight. To your point, that passion from the outside, these are people who are doing this because they love it. From the outside in a lot of cases. Some of them are being paid by companies, but they also are doing it on their time scale, not yours. And so being very positive and trying to help grow them in a way that gives them good feedback and gets you what you want and tunes it up is important.
Yeah, so like giving them recognition publicly, sending them like small gifts, I find works really well.
I have a stack of chocolate bars in my desk that get shipped with Kubernetes postcards, and you would be astonished how many tweets I get of, I just got a card from Sarah.
It does two things, right? It kind of, quote unquote, locks those people in, to use kind of marketing buzzwords and whatnot, but also like gives more visibility to others that might join your community, right? So that's a really good kind of easy trick. So let's talk a little bit about a bit of an edge case. Like, one thing I really love to talk about is runaway communities, where the communities grow so big, so quickly, that you don't have this problem of like, how do I grow a community and how do I get somebody to pay attention to my product? But you tend to have an opposite class of problems. And, I would say, Docker maybe as a company, as a technology stack, they're a little bit in that situation right now. There's so much attention on them, so many developers willing to take it in so many different directions. And I don't know what it is at Kubernetes, right? But you're in a very similar kind of positioning, very big community as well. So what are some of the things you've seen when communities grow very large, right? Hopefully when you succeed, what tends to happen, right? What are some of the things that you think people have to be ready to deal with if they make it really big?
Adding process and being completely transparent. Kubernetes is being moved from being a company-founded project to a foundation and community-led project over this last year. So in December, we founded the Cloud Native Compute Foundation and put Kubernetes in that with a broader vision for that foundation to include more software than just Kubernetes. But Kubernetes as a project has now had enough successes that you have to really be transparent about your decisions, because there's an information gap between your core committers and people who are new to the project, or people who want to participate but aren't on the inside of the hallway conversations that might happen. And so being completely transparent and setting up good processes about being transparent is important.
And that's useful for a couple of different things, right? You have to worry about individual contribution, but you also have to worry about corporate contribution. And I've noticed as projects grow large, companies all of a sudden become really worried about, am I giving too much of my time to Google or Facebook or whoever, or how can I bring this back to my side? And it gets really weird and political and complicated. And so a foundation can be a good way, right?
And it goes back to those clear boundaries, the clear boundaries in software. So you can build a product that is clearly not in competition with the core product because you have a nice clean edge. And that's one of the spots that I think Kubernetes is doing really well. We've said very explicitly, we don't want to be a PaaS. So we have multiple different companies around us working with us, contributing code, that are building PaaSes on top of Kubernetes.
That visibility into kind of what your roadmap and strategy is, I think is such a critical thing that a lot of open source and corporate kind of projects really lack, where people on the outside might be wondering like, well, if I do this app, a commercial app on top of it, will I compete against the primary thing or not? And they don't really know what the intention is and where you might turn into, whether you're going to be a competitor all of a sudden in a little bit. And so even if you can just communicate a little bit on that, I think that that's something that helps you grow in this middle and late stages quite a bit, right? I think it's something that can be quite tricky to maneuver. And it's changing quite a bit. The scene seems to be like going to a whole bunch of different directions. Now we see a lot of like independent foundation. It used to be like everybody would go to Apache. Now I feel like everybody kind of, not everybody, but you're seeing more independent foundations prop up with different things.
Well, there ends up being different use cases for foundations now. For us, it was more about holding the trademark, holding the IP rights, and marketing the vision of cloud native, as opposed to wanting what Apache used to give, which was, we gave you the infrastructure for your source control. We gave you, a set of specific processes.
Right, and legal support.
And legal support. And those are just different.
Yeah, you just it's more of a focus on kind of business and strategy. That makes sense. So thanks a lot.
So Unity is I didn't really mention it, but it's like a 3D technology at heart.
Right.
It's pretty good for 2D games as well, but it's the biggest value is in 3D. Now, on every single platform until like recently, 3D was like an afterthought. It was not the primary use case, maybe for the game consoles, but even there it's been mixed 2D and 3D. With VR and AR, finally we have platforms that are like primarily or only 3D. Like there is no 2D anymore. Like it has, even like flat surfaces have to live in 3D.
You're not interacting to it, through a 2D screen or a TV screen, right? Exactly. You're really just living in it.